So a lot of people out there would probably say that the camera is one of the most important bits of their spangly new smartphone, and that's what they really concentrate on when they are upgrading their blower. After all, these backhands aren't going to post pictures of themselves on the internet so people can see what I'm slowly destroying my liver with this given week. And it's imperative that I fill up my Google Drive storage with endless identical photos of my cats, of course, for some reason. The good news is that these days you don't have to spaff out the best part of $1,000 on some fancy pants flagship to get a semi-decent smartphone camera. Now in recent times I've reviewed dozens of budget-friendly handsets, and here's my pick of the ones with the best cameras slapped on that back end for a budget of around £400, £300 and even stretching down to around the £200 mark. You'll find full videos, unboxings and reviews on all of these smartphones mentioned right here, and for more on the latest and greatest tech, please do subscribe and ding that notifications bell. Cheers! Now first up is one of the freshest budget phones launched in February 2022, the Realme 9 Pro Plus. At 350 quid, this boasts some pretty impressive specs which stretches all the way to that clever camera tech. The primary camera sensor is a 50 megapixel Sony IMX766 with built-in optical image stabilization, and this really does capture impressive photos for this price point. It's a step up from many rivals. In strong light, you'll occasionally get a bit of saturation, but the Realme 9 Pro Plus can cope admirably with sharp contrast. These test shots serve up more detail than the competition, especially in the darker areas. Even indoors, the detail levels don't noticeably drop, while colour reproduction is still close to natural. In ambient light, moving subjects do occasionally look fuzzy. If they are in motion, that's no real surprise. Oh, and just a minor random aside, never ever get a chocolate orange beer, even if it's just a quid. It's kind of like an Oompa Loompa just threw up in a can. The Realme 9 Pro Plus's 8 megapixel ultra-wide lens also doesn't shock, struggling to produce as natural looking results as the primary sensor, but it's handy for fitting more into the frame. And yes, Realme, like Xiaomi and many others, feels obligated seemingly to slap a macro lens on the back end of its smartphones as well, so yeah, you've got one of those here too. Yippee hooray celebrations. You've also got a big old bag of bonus modes, including a night mode, which can brighten up your subject effectively, as long as they're completely still, of course. And there is a full-on pro mode on here as well, if you want to tinker with all of the settings and get a very precise kind of shot. For your home movies, you can record 4K video at 30 frames per second, and that's the setting that I stuck with. And even if colour reproduction isn't exactly entirely natural, you will get sharp visuals as well as clear audio from all directions. Images do get a little softer indoors and in the evenings, pretty typical from mid-range mobiles, but nothing too shocking. And even the stabilization isn't actually dreadful at that 4K resolution when you're bopping along and shooting simultaneously. And last up, if you're an Instagram fan, that 16 meg selfie shooter isn't anything special, but it'll do the job as long as, again, you aren't testing it with any particularly troublesome conditions. However, if you do want to shoot a bit of video using that front-facing camera, it does max out at full HD resolution, and the quality is absolutely fine. Again, the audio pickup is alright, nothing particularly stunning on the visuals side of thing, but it's fine for a bit of basic vlogging. So the Realme 9 Pro Plus, definitely one of my favourite camera phones out there right now at a budget price point. But if it's just a little bit above your budget, there is the standard Realme 9 Pro, which is a bit cheaper, comes in at under 300 quid. Although this uses different optics, so the camera results shouldn't be quite as good. I haven't done a full review of the Realme 9 Pro, unfortunately, but stay tuned for that. Now, it may be getting on a bit, but the Poco F3 from last year is still a mighty fine phone for an extremely affordable asking price. You got beefy performance, which is ideal for gaming, while movie fans can enjoy their flicks on a big, bold, beautiful 6.67-inch AMOLED screen. And yet, 9 months on, I am still happy with the Poco F3's camera tech as well. Its skills haven't really changed up much at all these past few months, admittedly, but that 48 megapixel primary sensor still spits out some good looking 12 meg pics in pretty much any kind of conditions. Even 9 months on, it's still one of the better mid-range mobiles for those optics, coping well when the light gets dim, even without having to rely on the night mode. It's probably just as well because that mode is generally ineffective. Living, breathing subjects are usually captured cleanly, even when they won't sit still, as long as that lighting is decent. Otherwise, yeah, you can expect some fuzzy results. And that portrait mode is a good one as well, adding a good bit of flair to your photos when required. Meanwhile, the Poco's 8 megapixel ultra-wide angle snapper is nothing special, serving up the usual alternative viewpoint while also sacrificing some detail and tonal accuracy. Pretty standard fare. And then the final lens you got slapped on the arse end of the Poco F3 there is a 5 megapixel telemacro effort, which to be honest I just completely ignore. You got very few issues with the video recording at this price point as well. You can capture 4K footage with strong enough details so the picture looks good on your telly. As long as the lighting is alright, it does suffer a bit when you're shooting indoors in more ambient environments, while audio is also clear from all directions as long as it isn't too breezy. And you can swap to the ultra-wide angle lens if you want by dropping to full HD resolution, but definitely don't really bother. It just ain't a good time. And yes, yippee hooray, you've got a 20 megapixel selfie shooter, which is perfectly respectable as well, capturing all the sags and bags a little too easily. Skin tones look natural even in soft light or strong contrast, so the Poco F3 accurately makes me look like an exhausted apparition with decent portrait results on top. And another good one now that it's dropped in price a bit is Xiaomi's 11 Lite 5G NE. Bit of a clunky name, but this is another all-round cracker boasting a Dolby Vision display, incredible battery life and a feature-packed MIUI experience, as well as of course a competitive camera. The 64 megapixel primary sensor can grab 16 meg snaps, and while the picture quality can't quite touch rivals such as the Pixel 4a and again that A52s 5G, it's not half bad. Shoot something in decent light and you'll enjoy realistic colours and fine detailing in your photo, as long as you leave that AI mode well alone. Even in more ambient light, the results are decent if you're not trying to shoot anything in motion, so kittens and sugared up kids are right out. And the night mode doesn't do a huge amount to boost the brightness when the lighting is crap, but it does make a small difference. And as usual with Xiaomi smartphones, you've got plenty of other bonus modes to play around with here, including good old Pro mode of course if you want to tinker with the white balance, all that shenanigans. And a portrait mode that does a great job with living subjects and disembodied mannequin heads, smearing out all of that background clutter so they really stand out. The Xiaomi 11 Lite 5G NE also serves up an 8 megapixel ultra-wide angle shooter that, like most ultra-wide angle lenses, sacrifices tonal accuracy for a broader scope. And yes, you've got a 5 megapixel telemacro lens if you want to shoot weird close-ups. For all your video needs, this mobile can record up to 4K resolution footage at 30 frames per second. And again, I was happy enough with the results. As long as that lighting holds up, the visuals are sharp enough so you can enjoy your footage on a big screen, while the audio capture is also nice and clear. And the 20 megapixel selfie shooter will do a decent enough job as long as you do two things. Turn off that stupid beautify bollocks and avoid strong light, as you'll just end up with oversaturated results. Otherwise, it's perfectly fine with excellent portrait smarts. And next up, another smartphone with a thrilling title. It's the Samsung Galaxy A52s 5G, and it's just further proof that Samsung can spaff out a perfectly good mid-range smartphone as well as those super premium priced flagship blowers. You've got pretty much the same highly enjoyable One UI experience as those top-end blowers, as well as some smooth running and long battery life. Now the camera tech appears unchanged here on the A52s 5G versus that older A52 model, once again spearheaded by a 64 megapixel shooter with optical image stabilization. And this proved ideal for everyday family snaps both indoor and out, capturing bright, crisp, detail-packed photos with natural looking colours and contrast. The portrait mode adds a gorgeous bit of bokeh style focus fade when you're snapping fellow human beings, and even when said human beings won't stand still for a bloody millisecond, it's rare for pics to be ruined by blurry limbs and the like, unless you're shooting at night. And even at night, you can grab some respectable snaps even on that auto mode. And also a shout out as always to Samsung's single take mode, which is a hell of a lot of fun to play around with when you're snapping kids and pets and the like. This thing spurts out all manner of filtered pics and random clips, which are usually at the very least entertaining. And yes, you also have Samsung's fun mode, and boy howdy, let me tell you, there's nothing my dark hateful soul enjoys more than whatever this shit is. Samsung's 12 megapixel ultra-wide angle snapper also did a fine job. Colours aren't quite as accurately captured with this secondary lens, but I still liked most of the results I saw as long as the lighting wasn't too dim. At night time, this lens really struggles with motion and detail levels are low, so just give it a pass. And if you like shooting bugs and other gross things in your back garden, the 5 megapixel macro lens is worth a squint. And that's all the main stuff. The last lens in this quad lens setup here on the back end of the Galaxy A52s 5G is a simple 5 megapixel depth sensor used for those portrait snaps. For your home movies, you can shoot 4K video at 30 frames per second or Full HD at 30 or 60 FPS. And again, I was happy with what I saw, even when I was trying to shoot a complicated dance routine indoors with fairly ambient light. The Samsung A52s 5G does a decent job of capturing audio from all directions while blocking out wind and other unwanted noise. Image stabilization is pretty good too, although at night the results are rather grainy and ugly. And last up, the Galaxy A52s 5G's 32 megapixel selfie snapper is good for bright daylight pics with the option to zoom in on your face and blur the background if you want to dazzle everyone on Insta with that award-winning smile. But the camera is rather pants in low light, churning out grainy, blurry pics, so just don't even bother. Another favourite budget-friendly camera phone of mine is the OnePlus Nord 2, which again sports a slick AMOLED screen, smooth everyday performance and dependable battery life. Slapped on that arse end is a 50 megapixel Sony IMX766 camera sensor, same as the Realme 9 Pro, and it's once again a good one in most circumstances. The usual quad pixel bin and shenanigans means you get 12.5 megapixel photos by default, and that is enough detail to keep your pics looking crisp when blown up, although finer detail is often lacking, and in stronger lights you will occasionally see some bleaching, but the Nord 2 often does alright with a bit of contrast for a mid-ranger. That upgraded Dimensity 1200 AI chipset allows the OnePlus Nord 2's camera to detect and differentiate between 22 different subject types. That is, as long as you've actually got the AI mode active in the camera app. And yeah, I did find that this often produced less natural looking results in favour of more vivid pics, but if you're not a fan of that, you can always just knock it off. For living subjects, you can long press the shutter button and burst shot, and then choose your favourite, or let the phone pick for you instead. And this definitely does the job for any less obliging subjects who just won't bloody stand still. I found that indoor and more ambient shots came out well too. The optical image stabilization helps to prevent blurry soft results caused by slight hand tremors, and detail levels are perfectly respectable. Even moving subjects are usually handled pretty well once again. And the portrait mode usually churns out attractive snaps with a gorgeous bit of bokeh action. As for extreme low light, well, the phone's focus still copes, and that nightscape mode can ensure that you get brighter results, so it's well worth a pop, if again unfortunately inferior to that Pixel 4a. The Nord 2 serves up a couple of bonus lenses, including an 8 megapixel ultra-wide angle effort that does a decent job. Colour reproduction is similar, not entirely accurate but not bad. And yes, there's a 2 megapixel mono lens if you want to shoot black and white photos to feel like you're all arty and shit. On the video front, you can't shoot 4K footage at 60 frames per second, but I was happy enough with my 30 FPS home movies. Viewed back on a monitor or a TV, you've got a commendable level of detail packed into every frame. Just don't try and fight the light and you'll get a good overall picture, although colours can once again be somewhat smothered when you're recording outdoors. Image stabilization is good though, even at that Ultra HD level, so you can move and shoot without puke-inducing results. And audio pickup is generally clear from all sides, while wind distortion ain't too bad, so overall, definitely good stuff. And last up, that Nord 2 selfie shooter uses a 32 megapixel IMX615 sensor, and this doesn't quite do skin tones full justice. I swear that even my northern skin isn't this bloody pale all of the time. But it is otherwise fine. Again, it does a good job with portrait shots, and you've got nightscape support for low light snaps if you want to avoid that screen flash shiny face syndrome. And if you're tempted, but that OnePlus Nord 2 is still just a little bit out of your budget, well, no worries. OnePlus has also launched the slightly more wallet-friendly Nord CE 2, where the CE stands for Core Edition. This slashes some of the specs to reach that more budget-friendly price, while the camera tech has been swapped out for a more basic 64 meg sensor, the same tech as found on the original OnePlus Nord CE. And this is a bit more limited, struggling with more ambient conditions, but it is fine for your everyday shots as long as you just take a little bit of care. And if the full review isn't live right now on TechSpert as you're watching this video, will hopefully be coming soon, but otherwise I've got a full unboxing if you want an in-depth tour of this bad boy. Now, another mobile manufacturer who often serves up great value smartphones for a wallet-friendly budget price is Motorola, and one of its best ones right now for around the £200 price point is the Moto G60s. Highlights include a whopping great 6.8-inch 120Hz display, plus incredible battery life boosted by the 50-watt fast charge support. And slapped on the arse end is a 64 meg primary sensor which can shoot some good looking everyday snaps, helped along by Motorola's clever AI tools, which can crop into and straighten up your shots to make them even more pleasing to your peepers. Otherwise, if you can afford a bit more scratch, well, Motorola has also spaffed out the excellent Moto Edge 20 Lite. Costs a bit more, closer to £300, but definitely upgrades that camera tech, some really nice everyday photos and home movies. And I've got full unboxings of both of these Moto blows live right now. Now, one affordable camera phone that I sadly haven't had a chance to test out is Google's Pixel 5a, which is only for sale in select regions like the US, not here in Blighty. And like the 4A before it, this delivers a flagship style camera experience for a fraction of the price of the Pixel 6. And if you've personally used the Pixel 5a or any other smartphones which you feel pack a really good bit of camera tech for a low budget price point, well, definitely clue me up in the comments down below. It'd be great to hear from you. Please do poke subscribe and ding that notifications bell for more on the latest and greatest tech. And have yourselves a bloody wonderful rest of the week. Cheers everyone. Love you.